Joining me is NBC News correspondent Molly Hunter and Jonathan Franks, a crisis management consultant and spokesperson for the Bring Our Families Home campaign. He worked as a consultant on the case of American Trevor Reed, who was released from a Russian prison earlier this year as part of a prisoner exchange. Molly, I do want to start with you. We weren't really expecting leniency here, given Russia's track record, that 99% number there we just threw out. But was this still a shocking sentence?
Yeah, Joe, you're absolutely right. We knew this was likely going to be a guilty sentence, a guilty verdict with a hefty sentence. The real question today, and what we were waiting for, of course, was the number. Were they going to go with the maximum sentence that those two charges against Brittney Griner carried, which was 10 years, or were they going to go with something closer to what the prosecution asked for, which was 9.5? Of course, they ended up going with 9, with obviously that fairly hefty fine as well. Look, this was not shocking. The WNBA says in a statement, unjustified, unfortunate, but not unexpected. I think that is what we are hearing from officials across the board. Leniency was never expected. U.S.-Russia relations right now are at an all-time low, of course. This comes at a backdrop, of course, with the Russia-Ukraine war, the U.S. actively, of course, helping the Ukrainian side. And the Russians know, Joe, right now, that President Biden will do a lot to get Brittney Griner and Paul Whelan home.
All right, Molly Hunter, thank you so much for your reporting. Appreciate it. Jonathan, I want to bring you in here. There are a lot of questions about now this prison swap negotiation and why it didn't materialize before Griner's sentencing. Walk us through how these processes typically work, because you understand it well, and how much talks could accelerate now that we have a verdict and a sentence.
Joe, and I do think the talks will accelerate. This could have been handled while she was in trial, right? This is not a real court system. This is a country controlled by one man. I think what you're seeing in their unwillingness to negotiate in the past week before this sentence was final is they don't want to look like they want to make their legal system look somewhat legitimate. I mean, I watched the entire proceeding. I had a Google translator. I found it outrageous. This is exactly the number that I was predicting, right? This is exactly the number Trevor Reed got, and it is exactly the number the last American woman that got caught with cannabis in Russia got as well. So they are at least somewhat consistent, but horrible at the same time.
Jonathan, let's look forward here. How hopeful are you about a potential exchange of Griner and Paul Whelan for Victor Bout? Do you worry that this very public rhetoric from the White House and administration members like Secretary Blinken, something Russia does not like, that puts all this at risk?
I don't really understand why they did this, doing this in public. But then again, I've been campaigning for them to be more bold in public for years, so I kind of feel like I can't oppose it. I don't know why they did this, and I worry that it is going to. I'm not worried about the Russian side. They want Bout back a lot. I'm worried about the American side, right? And the Russians are going to try and inject an us versus them narrative into our discourse, and people can lose, their stomachs politically.
Jonathan, I want to play some sound of Griner's final plea this morning before sentencing. Let's listen to that.
I never meant to hurt anybody. I never meant to put in jeopardy the Russian population. I never meant to break any laws here. I made an honest mistake, and I hope that in your ruling that it doesn't end my life here.
So her fate now is essentially in the hands of that one man you mentioned, Vladimir Putin, which is not a position anyone wants to be in. In your mind, what's the most timely outcome here?
I think a trade of Victor Bout for Paul Whelan and Brittney Griner is appropriate. I'm also concerned about Mark Fogel, but a trade of Griner and Whelan for Bout is a great deal. And I just want to say, Joe, I mean, if they won't do a 2-for-1 deal, I'm going to say right now, I mean, the government should do a 2-for-2 deal. They cannot leave Ms. Griner in prison. They've left Paul Whelan in a gulag for too long. And it's time to get at the negotiating table and hammer out a deal. These deals are never neat and tidy. They're often politically unpopular. They leave a sour taste. But as a country, we have to decide if we're willing to bring our people home and what we're willing to do to get that outcome.
Jonathan Franks, thanks so much for joining us. We really do appreciate your time.
Thank you.